There comes a point when even resolution loses its appeal, not because everything is settled, not because clarity has arrived, but because the need to finish experience has quietly fallen away. This episode is about that point, about what it's like when nothing, not life, not emotion, not awareness itself, needs to be resolved in order to continue. Earlier in life, and earlier in this journey, resolution felt important. Things needed to make sense. Loose ends needed to close. Experiences needed meaning before they could be put down. That need wasn't a flaw. It was part of how stability was built. Resolution helped create relief. It offered certainty. It provided rest after effort. But over time, even resolution becomes unnecessary. Not wrong, just no longer required. When nothing needs to be resolved, experience doesn't feel incomplete. It feels ongoing, open, alive. This can feel unfamiliar at first. If resolution once felt like safety, its absence may feel like vulnerability. But very quickly, you begin to notice something important. Life doesn't pause waiting for you to finish it. Moments don't ask for closure. They arise, they move, they pass, and the next moment appears without reference to the last. When nothing needs to be resolved, emotion no longer needs an endpoint. You don't wait for feelings to conclude before continuing. You feel them as they move. Earlier, emotion often demanded resolution. Why am I feeling this? What do I need to do with it? Now, emotion doesn't require instruction. It doesn't need to be processed. It simply completes itself when it's allowed. This doesn't mean emotion disappears quickly. It means it doesn't get extended by effort. Without resolution seeking, emotion doesn't linger as unfinished business. When nothing needs to be resolved, thought also changes character. Thoughts don't need answers. Questions don't need conclusions. Ideas don't need to be finalized. Earlier, thought often circled until it found certainty. Now, thought can remain open. It doesn't need to land. This brings a subtle freedom. You don't have to decide what something means. You don't have to finalize your understanding. You let experience stay unfinished. When nothing needs to be resolved, identity loosens further. You don't need to settle who you are. You don't need to arrive at a version of yourself. You're allowed to remain undefined. Earlier, identity may have felt like something you were moving toward. Now, identity feels optional. You don't need to complete yourself. This can feel relieving. You don't have to reconcile all parts. You don't have to integrate everything. Life doesn't require you to be whole in a conceptual way. When nothing needs to be resolved, time feels different. Moments don't feel like steps leading somewhere. They don't build toward an ending. They occur and dissolve. Earlier, time may have felt like a progression. Now, it feels more like movement. Not toward anything, just movement. This doesn't remove responsibility. You still act. You still respond. But you don't feel like you're finishing a story. You're participating in an unfolding. When nothing needs to be resolved, relationships feel lighter. You don't need conversations to conclude well. You don't need understanding to be mutual. You don't need closure. Connection doesn't depend on resolution. It happens, and then it moves. Earlier, relationships may have carried unfinished tension. Now, tension doesn't need to be resolved to be released. It passes when it's not held. When nothing needs to be resolved, conflict also feels different. Conflict doesn't need to be settled internally. You respond where response is needed. And when the moment passes, it passes. Earlier, conflict may have stayed active as unfinished emotion. Now, it doesn't linger. When nothing needs to be resolved, silence feels complete. Silence doesn't wait for meaning. It doesn't ask for insight. It doesn't need closure. It simply is. This stage doesn't feel like accomplishment. There's no sense of finally, just a quiet recognition that you're no longer trying to finish life. You may notice that you don't reflect as much, not because reflection is gone, but because it's no longer required. Life doesn't need to be wrapped up to be lived. When nothing needs to be resolved, even awareness loses its finality. Awareness doesn't need to arrive anywhere. It doesn't need to deepen. It doesn't need to conclude. It's simply present as life unfolds. This can feel deeply settling, not because everything is resolved, but because nothing is being held open intentionally. You may still notice the habit of seeking resolution. Old patterns surface, but when they do, they don't take over. They relax. This isn't something to practice. It's not something to maintain. It's what remains when even spiritual completion is no longer needed. When nothing needs to be resolved, life doesn't feel unfinished. It feels alive. You don't need to remember this. You don't need to apply it. If it resonates, you'll notice it in your own moments. If it doesn't, nothing is missing. Life doesn't require resolution to continue, and you don't need to finish yourself to live fully. If any of this feels familiar, you don't need to hold on to it. But if you'd like to stay connected, you're welcome to. Liking the video helps it reach others who may be quietly realizing that they don't need to resolve everything. And if these reflections support you as life continues without closure, you can subscribe, not to arrive anywhere, but to keep the door open. And if someone you care about has been trying to finish themselves or their life story, you're welcome to share this with them. Only if it feels natural. Sometimes the deepest rest comes from realizing nothing needs to be resolved at all.